Hi, guys, listeners, viewers, welcome back. So excited to have you with us. Now, this is going to be a little bit of an exciting episode because the name of our podcast program has changed. Perhaps you've seen this everywhere you turn. You can't get away from it. The change of our podcast is now Business Leadership Experts, where we are bringing solid advice, practical advice from our own experiences in working with small and medium-sized business owners. Only the name has changed, folks, because I am still joined by my co-host, Mrs. Ann Holm. And as we all remember, Ann is a professional certified coach, and she is specializing in executive and organizational development coaching, in addition to being a certified master practitioner of the Myers-Briggs type indicator. We're going to talk about that. That's coming in today as well. She offers the Type Coach online assessment, which not only assists with personal development, but also team development, which we are working with a team today. We're going to be talking about this as well. Now, in addition, she's also certified to assess and coach emotional intelligence. We're going to be talking about that today. But prior to coaching, she had 25 years of experience in applied brain science. Yeah, experience in applied brain science. She's a brain scientist. No, I went over there, but she is co-authoring a book right now on that very topic of applied brain science. Now, Anne does have a Bachelor of Arts and a Master's of Science from, get this, the University of Michigan. She is still grieving over their loss in
too soon. Too soon.
Is it too early to go there? It's too early to go there. We're not going to do that.
Oh.
Anne is also one of our leadership development coaches at Temple Executive Coaching. And like I said, she and we are currently team coaching with a client right now. And they've seen phenomenal results. And in fact, they've asked Anne and I to do more. So we're seeing some fantastic things there. But Anne, I want to talk about, as we all know, the COVID havoc that's been that has just kind of ravaged personally and, of course, the business sector.
Yes.
All of my clients, I have clients in Texas, I have some clients in California, I have some clients on the East Coast. It has been a primary topic because we're now moving into a new wave. I'm going to say a new wave of anxiety, fear, and uncertainty, because we're not asking our employees to leave to go work from home, and we're asking them now to come back in to the office.
Yes.
And this is a whole other level now of some of that anxiety and fear. I've got leaders who, are struggling with this, how they're going to be working with their employees coming back in. It's taking such a focus off of what the business does do. So now they're having to deal with a level that they've never dealt with before of anxiety and fear. And it's got nothing to do with the service they provide or the product they produce.
Yes.
Joanne, what in the world is going on? How are we going to manage through this? Talk to me, Anne.
Yeah, certainly. So there's a lot to unpack there because, as you said at the beginning here, that there was the pandemic hit, everybody was sent home to work. You scrambled to get your Zoom up and running, or, your way of working at home, and got kind of settled in there, not without a lot of different challenges, by the way. But now there is the reopening, depending on where you live and everything, of businesses with various rules and all of that in place. And what that tends to do is create a sense of ambiguity. So people aren't really sure what it's going to be like when they go back. They don't even know if they really want to go back. We really got driven to the brink as far as our fear and anxiety is concerned. And now we're adding a whole new layer to it, which is what happens when I return. And so what I'm finding in my work is the anxiety, the lack of clarity, the ambiguity
Hmm.
creates some anxious and feelings, negative feelings
Hmm.
that will drive us toward certain mindsets that may not be useful to us. Those mindsets are called saboteurs, and we'll get to those here in a minute. But the first thing that happens is as we try to get ourselves ready to take this next step of returning
Hmm.
is there's this thing called the judge, and the judge jumps in and starts saying, I don't know if I'm up to it. They judge
Hmm.
themselves, through a certain framework, and then they start judging other people as well. So, well, if I go back, that person isn't going to do this, or that person's not going to do that.
Hmm.
And then we start judging the circumstances, which is, I can't believe we're in this position, or any number of ways of interpreting and judging the whole situation. And so you basically have a very anxious time.
Hmm.
And when people are anxious, they tend to uh, fall into habits of mind that aren't necessarily helpful. Kind of almost sabotages, actually, is the word we use.
Right.
Sabotages our best performance and success because we're tied up into these emotions.
Yeah. And what's been highlighted about these saboteurs that we're going to talk about, Ann, is that,
Mm,
you know, as the media has been constantly or had been constantly talking about the virus,
yes.
constantly posting, this is how many people have come down with the virus. This is, of course, now we've got the death rate of the
Yes.
virus, and you couldn't get away from it. In talking with some of my business owners, we just don't know after
Yes.
they've been bombarded by the media and, of course, mask mandates and distancing. We don't know in the core of someone how that's going to affect them over time,
That's
right?
correct.
So
That's
we're going to
correct.
see a side to people that, one, we may not have ever known or seen in them,
Yes. Yes. Very true.
and then ourselves.
Yes.
I have a leader client in South Carolina, and one of his partners in the business, they were having this meeting about, they were, employees, of course, working from home. So they had to get that all set up.
Yep.
And, but they were deemed an essential business. So they weren't shut down,
Yep.
luckily.
Yep.
And the partners were having a really tough, discussion and decision, who should come back, how we're going to, how we're going to have them in the office, who is and who isn't. And one
Yeah.
of them brought up this rather poignant point. He turned to one of the owners and he said, look, because one owner was said, look, nobody should be working from home. I think everyone should be working here in the office. So those who are coming in, whatever, if they don't come in, fire them.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And he turned to his friend who was saying this. He said, look, you don't understand. As they're driving into work, they're seeing a sign, a roadway sign that says, save lives, stay home.
Yeah.
And they're
Exactly.
seeing that sign as they're driving into work, right? And
Yes.
then, they're getting hit with the other side of, look, the survival rate from this virus is like what, not over 99% survive the virus. So we're
Yes.
getting two messages bombarded by two sides of the equation, and we don't know. And that itself, oh, sorry about that, knocked over the mic. That itself can divide people, right? That
Yes.
itself can divide those, those who look at the number of, these are the number of deaths. This
Right.
death is linked to a single person. That's a real person to this number. Then the other one says, well, but look, 99% are
Hmm.
surviving who do contract the virus. The virus isn't even in the CDC's top 10 leading causes of death, but it is marketed more than any of the others. So back to the point of, we don't know how these individuals, once they've received so much information on this, how they're going to start acting. Some of these things they may
Right.
not have known about themselves.
Well, it's an interesting thing that you bring up as far as how they'll start acting, because it's inherently a very anxiety provoking state of affairs. They'll start looking at it through the lens of their saboteur, because
Mm,
their saboteur is going to be exactly the thing that tries to process that and make that it's driven by that emotion.
Mhm.
It's an interesting thing when you talked about you're driving downtown to go to work and you see the thing that says, go uh, go home, forget it, don't come in. You're gonna kill somebody. Um, and then I saw one in here in Minnesota where they had a thing on a grocery store that said "mask it or casket." And I was like, "Holy
Right.
mackerel." Yeah, so we've attached this whole scenario to, the thing we fear most, which is death.
Right.
Death of ourselves, death of our loved ones.
Mm.
And so this is why it's so anxiety provoking. All
Mhm.
right.
Mhm.
And as we discuss these saboteurs, you're going to see why people take that same scenario and and think of it in a different way, and why
Right.
we have so much so much a lack of harmony around what this really is, or what we should really do about it. So now we're coming back to that phase of, restaurants are opening, and now we're looking at coming back to work. And,
Mhm.
it would be enough of a challenge if it was, you got to go back to work now that you've gotten used to working from home. That alone would be a big challenge.
Mhm.
But then there's that layer of, but what happens if you don't wear a mask at the right spot and you happen to encounter somebody who has the B1 variant, and before you know it, you're dead.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there's could be nothing more anxiety provoking than, that there's still this possibility you could die,
Yeah.
right?
No, and as we're looking at these saboteurs, I'm going to call them guys.
Yep,
So
yep,
we're looking at these guys. What are some of the things that business owners, leaders, or just people in the workplace themselves? This is affecting
yes,
everyone, right?
yes,
What are
yes.
some of the things that they may see? What does it look like?
Mhm.
Who are these 9 guys?
Well, I can actually show you if I'll share my screen so
Yes,
people
please do.
can start to understand, what these look like. So,
There we go.
okay,
We see a.
can you see them? All
Oh
right.
yeah.
Okay. So let me start at the very top of this
And as we're
first.
going, as Anna's going through this, guys, I apologize, Anne, for interrupting. As Anna's going through this, 2 things for you to look at. One, the saboteur that's within others. The second thing is yourself.
Yes.
This isn't just an outward perspective. This is an inward perspective as well. And at the end of this, um, I'm going to share with everyone. I took the positive intelligence saboteur assessment, and
Yes.
I'm going to share with everyone what my results were. Who am I out of all of these that Anna's going to introduce
Yes.
you to? So, Anne, please tell us who these guys are.
Okay. So these are there's 9 of these characters, and so these are the mindsets that we use. And the ironic and funny part about this is we are so certain that this perspective is the only true perspective, and that everybody else is doesn't understand or whatever.
Mhm.
And so not only are you going to look at what this looks like in yourself, you're going to perhaps be able to look at it by the way it looks in somebody else. The irony being, you'll probably notice some saboteur about somebody else before you'll notice the impact of a saboteur that you have on yourself. And then the last thing, and we'll use an example actually of a library, that there are then the interactions of these different characters
Mhm.
as they come back into an inherently stressful situation. So let's get started.
Yeah.
So this very first one, is the guy with the bag over his head, is his saboteur is known as the avoider. So in the context of this whole pandemic thing, the avoider is going to have the perspective of, this is way overblown. We're all going to be fine, and just quit talking about it. So this individual is not interested in having his flow or peace disturbed by the possibility of something being a little bit scary, for
Mm.
instance. So they're going, if somebody says, "Oh my God, I heard on the news that a 38-year-old woman died after COVID. She had no underlying medical conditions. And what an avoider might say in that situation is, well, you know what? That that's an outlier. That's it's overblown.
Mhm.
We're only focusing on that one woman, and
Mm,
let's just get going here.
mhm.
So there's this desire to not want to acknowledge anything that is negative or unpleasant.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
the second one is the controller. So under these anxious and unsure conditions, the controller is tries very hard to double down on attempts to not only to control themselves but control others.
Mhm.
So if let's say people are coming back to the office, they might find themselves becoming uh, extra controlling about the micro details of the remote workforce, or they might be controlling how they return. They're trying to make sense of their world by way of controlling everything they can possibly control, and
Mm,
even things they can't control.
mm,
This is that particular character. Um, the hyperachiever is another character,
mhm.
and this is the guy that worked nonstop from home. So there's been
Mm,
some literature from the Wall Street Journal talking about people who have been working from home have
right.
had a difficult time with the work life balance. It's,
Mhm.
your work has come into your home. And so these guys are working nonstop. And then they're on top of that, they start to look down on others who aren't doing the same thing, who aren't
Mm,
available 24/7 and things like that. So they keep working harder and harder and harder.
mm,
Their work-life balance is disrupted, and now they're looking at others who aren't working to their level.
mm,
So, but it's an anxiety provoking sort of a thing. I've gotta, be the top. I gotta be the top. I gotta be the top.
mhm.
So as that individual returns to work, they may then come back and take this mindset back into the office of demonstrating that they're the hardest working guy in the whole place.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, the next one is the hyper rational. So we see actually a lot of these guys in the news, and it's the hyper rational who says, "Follow the science. Just follow the science." And we hear this again and again and again, and what we're not seeing, or what the downside to that kind of thinking is that those individuals ignore the emotional and psychological consequences of
Mm,
the lockdown and the reopening. So they say, "Oh, follow the science." Now, first of all, follow the science. There's a lot of speculation about what the science actually is, because the nature of science in the first place is that it's meant to be uh, uh, picked apart and re uh, rethought. I mean, that's the nature of science. Science is by nature uh, a
evolving.
topic. It evolves, and
Yeah.
we're supposed to stick our theory out there for now until some other theory displaces it. Well, with the hyper rational, they're saying things like follow the science, and they're not really thinking about the emotional impact of the lockdown, the reopening. So let's say they say, you know what, follow the science, you can do this or you can do that, but then you've
Mhm.
got an individual who's worried about whether or not they're going to, with some remote chance that they're going to give the virus to their grandmother. The hyper rational is going to ignore that, or um, the impact, for instance, on the kids that were held
Right.
back, for instance,
Yeah. Mhm.
that follow the science versus, well, what's going on with the mindset of somebody or the emotional needs of somebody. But you're going to, you'll see that character as well.
Yeah. Like, and like you said, Anne, whose science, right?
Yeah.
I mean, whose science are we going to support? It's ever evolving. I think Dr. Fauci, first it was, he said you got to, maintain 6 feet
Yep.
apart. And now all of a sudden it's now 3 feet, right?
Yes.
It's okay to be 3 feet. apart, and the science of the mask was always evolving. It works, it doesn't work. And, so it's, your position can evolve, right?
Right,
I mean,
right.
from one moment to, I'm going to say, the next moment, and from one side of the spectrum to the other side of the spectrum.
Well, I started when you said the 3 feet too, I kind of chuckled to myself because I thought about all those little stickers on the floor that tell you where to stand. They got to move them. Um,
You got to move. Yeah, you got to move the sticker. What's 3
yeah,
feet from 6 feet? Put
right.
a new color sticker in there. You know.
Well, and here's the thing, for somebody who this can be very anxiety provoking, all
Hmm.
this shifting around. And so when somebody says follow the science, it's like this decree from on high that by its very nature is going to change.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but that kind of character can cause a lot of um, negative emotions within a work team because
Hmm.
they just yeah, follow the science, that's it, and there's nothing else beyond that. And so it becomes a kind of a, what do I want to say, an aggravating stance
Yeah.
to people who are seeing the discrepancies in that thinking.
Hmm. Right.
So, and then the next one is I love this guy, this hypervigilant. So these are individuals who have been working from home and feeling pretty safe. And now they're saying to themselves, I'm not going to set foot into the office until everyone there in my community is vaccinated. I'm going to wear 2 masks. And by the way, the vaccine's going to kill you too. So there's no winning with these people because there's no way that they can possibly feel safe,
Yeah.
right?
What a nightmare. And of course, that's coming to the forefront too, right?
Yes, it
First, it
is.
was
Yes,
six
it
feet,
is.
3 feet. Now
Yep.
it's not 1 mask, but 2 masks.
Right,
And
right,
right. And now it's, well, we have a vaccine. Some vaccines work. Some, I don't want to say, reports say some don't work, right? Some make you
right,
sick. Some don't make you sick. I mean,
right.
and of course, the vaccine, like you said, itself is going to kill you. You know.
Right, right. And it's and you see the problem is it's not that you are paying attention to important variables to take care of your health. So I'll illustrate the difference. So if you have been advised to wash your hands
Hmm.
repeatedly or frequently, or use sanitizer, those are self-protective measures that generally speaking have been proven to be useful, and they should take care of a lot of issues. It's common practice, standard practice. And that's being vigilant, making sure that you're taking care for the safety of yourself and others. The
Right.
hypervigilant is this idea that I have to layer it upon layer it upon layer it, and even then I might still go down.
Right.
And and I know people who are like that.
Oh heavens,
They,
yes, yes.
who just feel like, okay, my gosh, I have no way out of this.
There's, yeah.
I can't take the vaccine, it'll kill me. I guess I got to wear, 5 masks, but then I might suffocate. Um, there's just the idea of being safe it's the safety monster wants to be fed
The
constantly.
I like that. The safety monster wants to be fed constantly on both sides. I have a client that they have a what's ironic enough that their head of HR was hyper vigilant, and no one should go into work, and there should be multiple layers of mask. And what's funny is that they did not know, they couldn't find this person. They didn't know if they were in the office, out of the office. They would send them emails checking on them. Are you okay? We haven't seen you. And finally they got a hold of this individual, and they said, look, we need your help. Again, another business that was deemed essential, and said, look, we need your help in the office in working through some of these protocols, helping us set them up, answering some questions. and we haven't been able to get a hold of you by email. So working from home isn't working. You're not returning your texts. So how can you help us? And again, this is a person who is hyper vigilant. And they said, okay, well, I'll be in tomorrow. And so they went into the office and nobody could find this guy anywhere. And the door to the office was closed. His office door was, I should say, his office door was closed. The blinds were drawn, and they couldn't find the individual anywhere. So finally someone says, well, have you tried knocking on his door? And they went and they knocked on his door, and the guy comes over, and through the blinds, he had the blinds closed. He peeks through the blinds and he's wearing his mask, and he's talking to him through a window with his mask on. And they're trying to help, ask him, hey, we'll stay 6 feet away from you, but we've got some things we need to take care of in the break room and between the cubicles. And we need your help in, crafting some of these emails from HR on the protocols. And the guy would just not get involved.
Yeah.
And I guess he thought, that if his computer could catch a virus, some sort of COVID virus. But this was a guy who was going way over. And, he even made some statement, said, look, if I catch this virus, and they were talking to him on the phone because they couldn't get him to come in. Because if I come in and I catch this virus, and this virus kills my kids, I'm never going to forgive you for this.
Right.
And one guy made the comment, says, well, you don't live with your kids. And
Well, see, I mean, that's an extreme example for
Yeah.
sure. But what the issue here is that when you have a hyper vigilant mindset, and it's driven by anxiety, fear, and uncertainty,
Mhm.
and one of the most anxiety, fear, and uncertainty provoking thoughts is that either you or somebody you love could die.
Right.
So it can really, really drive this doubling down of trying to protect yourself.
Mhm.
And so you might be somebody who in general is pretty good about seeing the unsafe things on the horizon and alert people. And so you've got a high value as far
Right.
as that's concerned. You can spot danger, all of that, and that's a great thing. There's a value to that. But when you're coming from a perspective of constant fear, anxiety, and ambiguity, this is the character that kicks in instead. And just circling back to what we're trying to talk about here as far as return to work,
Mhm.
those fears and anxieties are actually still there.
Sure.
And so because of that uncertainty, instead of being a person who, notices the things that need to be addressed from a safety perspective, you're taking it to the level of 5 masks, seal me in my room, etc.
Right.
And so that's the problem as they return to work. And if you've got somebody who's even like a super hyper vigilant person, they might not even want you to deliver something from the office to their home,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the next one is an individual, because of there's so much uh, the ambiguity causes so much pain and discomfort for a lot of people, that this individual known as the pleaser is going to work double hard to make sure everybody's happy.
Mm.
And they end up taking everybody's concerns on their shoulders. They take it all on. And so they wear themselves out trying to make sure that everybody's happy. And that particular saboteur can really de-energize somebody, because they come into that
Mm.
space and they're bending over backwards. Of course, it's important to be somebody who's involved and everything else like that. But the downside is that you can work so hard to please everybody else that you are putting yourself at risk as far as your health, your
Mhm.
burnout capacity, and all of that. So you might see this person coming back into work and taking on everybody's concerns, etc., they bring, let's say, I'm just going to use a funny example. Let's say they decide, okay, I'm going to bring a dozen muffins, and they set them down, and then they go, oh no, what if somebody eats one of those? And then they start getting a little concerned about maybe they shouldn't have done that, or, so there's a lot of desire to make people happy.
Are they spaced out enough? What if somebody's allergic to something in the muffins?
Well, yeah, and
It,
yeah, right, and that gets a little of that blend into the hypervigilant, but it's
yeah.
that idea of trying to make everybody happy. Um, the next one is this individual who is considered restless, and so these are guys who have been working from home, but
Hmm.
they've also been getting to the point where they're saying, "I just got to go somewhere. I just have to go somewhere. Maybe I can go to Bora Bora and work remote, and then after that, I'll go to Croatia, and then after that, I'll go somewhere else." So this has brought on a tremendous amount of restlessness in
Mm,
people. So it's not merely a decision that, okay, here's an opportunity for me to perhaps, go to rent a place in Florida for a month. Normally, I
right.
wouldn't do that because I'd have to be in the office, but I'll see it as an opportunity to go down there and work for, a month and take in some sun in January. Okay,
Right. Right.
that's there's no problem with that at all. It's the anxiety provoking, "Oh my god, I gotta get out of here. I'm going to Bora Bora. No, no, Croatia after that. No, no." And it's
Back
this
to Florida.
back to Florida, and after that, I'm gonna, and so it's a constant churning of wanting to be anywhere else but where you are.
Right.
And so imagine trying to get the Bora Bora Croatia man back into the office and say, "Okay, you know what? This is actually where you're gonna be 3 days a week." If you might see them be like, "What? I gotta come back from Florida? I got what? I have to go into the office? Oh my god, I gotta be there by 8," or whatever. You can see
Yeah.
some real anxiety around that change,
I
right?
just got to get out of here. Yeah.
I just gotta get out of here. Um, I know a lot of people like that. In fact, one of my saboteurs is restless, and
Ah.
while I wasn't looking to go to Bora Bora to work, because I already work, but generally from my office at home,
Hmm.
but I did find myself kind of looking around for something to do other than feeling like I was strapped to just doing something in my house.
Yeah.
So it had a huge impact on my restlessness. Um, the next one is the stickler. Now, this person is a really interesting character because this is the individual that is very concerned what the rules are, what are the protocols, and then it's such an anxiety provoking state of being that it's, you better follow these rules or you're a covidiot. You've heard people calling people covidiots, and just really browbeating people
Yeah.
for not doing something exactly as specified. And what's behind that is they get a sense of a false sense of control and relief by
Mm,
way of following all these protocols, right?
right.
And then people who don't follow them are, there's something wrong with them. Okay, so we're going to circle back. Keep this stickler in your mind, because we're going to
Right.
circle back to an example of what this could look like when people come back into the workplace. And then finally, the last one is the victim. So the victim is somebody that's like, "I can't believe I have to do this. I can't go back. Oh my God, our team is so dysfunctional." And they talk about all the ways this is a disaster. These are unprecedented, awful times, and I'm not up to it. And all the people I work with are jerks. And now
Mm,
we all have to go back under these conditions where
mm.
I have to work with jerks, and nobody knows anything. And so there's this concern about the whole world is going to fall apart. The sky is falling. Hey, even if I go back, I might even lose my job on top of that. So there's a victim mindset, and
Right.
and that you can see that show up as well.
Yeah.
So basically, these are mindsets there's 9 flavors of them. These are mindsets that come to the fore
Right.
when we're under, um, fear, anxiety, ambiguity. All right. They have a positive side in the sense that, for instance, let's say, a stickler is, you'd want somebody who was a really good protocol follower if they worked in the operating room, right?
Right.
So of
Right.
course you'd want somebody who would follow those protocols. What happens though is that it bleeds over to everything else. So it's
Hmm.
not this idea that, oh, we have to follow these protocols in the operating room. It's follow the protocol for everything. And there it it's and there's a
Everything.
yeah, and anxiety starts to build when the protocol isn't being followed. That's what a stickler is. It's not a person who can, put together best practices and all of that.
Hmm.
That's the advantage side, but we don't see that dark side. And the dark side comes out under these sort of um, anxiety provoking times.
So
We
they
don't,
stood. These are people who stood on the yellow dot in the road, 6 feet away from everybody else.
right.
Right. They had the double masks on.
Yes.
They've got layers of gloves on as well. They're using, no cash. They're not doing the cash thing because those are the rules. And in order to survive, we have to follow the rules, not just me, but you as well.
And
Is that right?
what you actually kind of put together was a blending of the hypervigilant and the stickler. The stickler is often um, even more so about just these are the rules, you know.
Hmm.
So I remember I went to the post office at Christmas time, and they had the little stickers on the floor, and I think I had to stand in line for the stamp machine, and I think I was probably 4.5 feet away from somebody, and this woman said, "You're too close." And I'm thinking, "Holy Moses," I wasn't even facing her. I was facing away from her. I was probably 4.5 feet away, and I had a mask on. But either she was hypervigilant and very concerned, or she was a stickler about the rules. You
Oh,
stand on the yellow
yeah,
dot. It's
yeah.
hard to know. It's hard to know. But my guess is that maybe there was a tremendous amount of anxiety about coming to the post office in the first place. And
Mm.
I'm thinking, in my own mind, of course I'm an avoider, I'm thinking to myself, well, what are you doing here then? Or you're overblowing this. you know? So that was my own mind. Maybe she had a legitimate reason. It's hard to say, but anyway, so the example I want to use though is I want to use the example of an avoider. So
Right.
this is overblown. It's fine. Quit talking about it. Working with a stickler. So they're in the same office together. In this case, they work in a library. And so you have a stickler who says when these books come in, um, they need to sit in this room for 3 days before we put them back on the shelf. And it's it's the protocol that she came up with or whoever gave it to her, might even be an old protocol, but it's the protocol.
Right.
And so she's saying that's the way it is, okay? And that you're going to do it that way. So the avoider says, well, you know, I think she's overblowing this, but I don't really want to have that confrontation with her. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to humor her. So the avoider here's the avoider. Because it's overblown, it's fine, whatever. But okay, I don't want the confrontation. I'm going to humor her. So she humors her and says, "Okay, we'll leave him in this back room." Well, about a half day goes past, and she starts putting other books in there and then taking out the other ones that haven't been quarantined for 3 days, not even by a long shot, and starts to put them back under the shelf. In other words, might as well just do it. She's not going to know the difference anyway.
Right.
This is all in her head, etc. And then the stickler discovers it and
Right.
notices, notice, by the way, sticklers have a real eye for detail. So they're going to notice.
They're
They
gonna
notice.
notice in
They're
you.
going to notice it. That's a bad idea. But anyway, so they notice the book's been put on the shelf, and she knows darn well it's only been in that room for 6 hours. Okay. So now what do you have? you have, instead of a conversation where two people can say, maybe let's see if we, can double check that protocol. Do we really need to do 3 days? Or, let's examine it. And that stickler says, yeah, you're right. Maybe we'll just make sure we're doing, what the current thinking is. Instead of that, she discovers now that she's been deceived by the avoider, right?
Right.
Okay. So what ends up happening then is an erosion of the relationship in the office. The motivation
Hmm.
behind the stickler was, I want to follow protocol. The motivation behind the avoider is, I think she's way overblown with her protocols, but I don't want to talk about it. I don't want my flow to be disrupted. So I'm just gonna, when she's not looking, I'm just gonna do whatever. She'll never know, that kind of
Right.
thing.
She'll
So
never know.
yeah. So you can take any combination of
Yeah.
these saboteurs, and you can come up with any office setting in which a relationship or a best practices working relationship can be eroded because the saboteurs are in the room. All right.
Right.
So, you've got the hyper vigilant comes in, and you move all the hand sanitizer out so they would just stop talking about it. Well, what that ends up doing is it just actually upsets them, right? So it might be the avoider says, I'm so really tired about them talking about hand sanitizer. I'm just going to move it. Right.
Right.
And so, and then maybe the pleaser says, oh no, bring it back. That she's unhappy. Or, I mean, okay, so we're using really, extreme examples here.
I don't think these are extreme examples.
Okay. Okay.
I honestly don't. The library example you use, that's a real example.
Hmm. Hmm.
The individual who was, in their office talking, behind with their mask on behind a plate glass window.
Right.
That's a real example, and that's kind of where, the point to where all of this is when, we've had the media reporting on so much of this virus, and
Yeah.
you got
The
media
march.
reports on two sides, right? you know the follow the science. 99% of people recover. Follow the science. Well, those people who have died are real individuals, and here's who they were, and this was their family, and the emotion tied to that. Once you have dripped that on people for over a year, we've been doing this for over a year, Anne.
Yes.
I don't
Yes.
think people who have these saboteurs realize that they were deep inside them this much. It's not a
Yes.
matter anymore of it quickly comes to the surface and then it quickly goes away. This stuff has been
Right.
pounded onto people
Yes.
for over a year.
Yeah, people have been living in this sort of scenario for over a year. And one of the things that's really interesting about this too, I had even though I'm an avoider, I had this revelation that there wasn't a single place on the globe you could go to escape it.
Yes, very
That you
true.
couldn't say, well, you know what, I'm just going to go to Switzerland, or I'm just going to go to Siberia, or I'm just going to go to the very tip of Peru. Um, you couldn't say any of that. Every single person was affected by this at some level.
Yes.
Higher levels of government, it just all the way down the line, it touched everything. And so when you have something that had its tentacles out in so many places, there was nowhere to run. And meanwhile, you have the disruption in your lifestyle, you
Right.
have the media pouring stories, negatives. It's always negative stories because, by the way, that's the human mind gravitates towards the negative. That's just kind of
Correct.
a thing. So we've been steeped in it, and our brain chemistry has been steeped in this really, really anxious, negative time, which is the perfect breeding ground for all of these 9 characters to come out. And,
Mhm.
this is the mindset of people who are, under stress.
Right.
So, and under these particular, in these particular ways. It's really almost the dark side of
Hmm.
something that could be useful, but we've gone to the dark side and we don't
Mm.
even realize it.
See, that was my next point, Ann. Is it so bad that we have these saboteurs, to maybe keep us from danger?
Well, here's the thing, you ask a good question. The reason why it's a saboteur is because it's not helping us. It's
Hmm.
driven by a negative emotion, and those negative emotions tend to be fear, anxiety, etc. So we go into more of a self-protective mode
Hmm.
when we're in saboteur mode. Now, let's take an example of what you might do instead. So let's take the guy who wants to go to Bora Bora or Croatia to work because he's
The
just got to
restless
get,
guy.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
the
restless
restless.
guy.
Just got to get
Yeah,
out of here.
just got to get out of here. You know what? There's nothing wrong with wanting to experience life at
Hmm.
all, at all. The issue is sometimes life is right in front of you and
Hmm.
you miss it. So, uh, it, let me use this example. So, if you have a raging ocean and there's waves and all kinds of things going on, and you say, I want to see my impact on that ocean, so you drop a pebble into the ocean and you see nothing's happening, so you got to go for the biggest boulder you can find and lift, and then you throw that into the ocean and you see a splash. All
Yeah.
right, that's the restless mindset. The restless mindset is like a raging ocean, and you constantly have to throw boulders in it to get any kind of reaction. All right.
Right.
However, if you start to recognize that there is the trips to Croatia and Bora Bora that
Hmm.
are satisfying, but also there's times when you're in a particular place and there's beauty in front of you. So when
Hmm.
people say, for instance, here's a perfect example. So if the restless individual is, wants to go to Bora Bora or Croatia, but if he takes a step back and says, okay, I'm going to calm things down. So if you look at a calm water and you drop a pebble in it, you can see impact. So what
Hmm.
you saw what we did see restless people do during the pandemic is recapture the idea of taking walks outside. These small things that have always been available to you.
Right.
People started taking advantage of it. I live on a lake, and there's a path around the lake. I have never seen so many people
Hmm.
walking around the lake because they can't go to Bora Bora or Croatia or
Right.
whatever, but they've learned to see the available options in front of them as being also satisfying. All
Hmm.
right.
Hmm.
So again, there's nothing wrong with wanting to, experience life and find things that are exciting. But when it falls into the saboteur mode is that you're pawing the ground
Mm.
because you can't do certain things and you aren't pivoting to things you can do.
Mm.
So that's when it becomes a saboteur.
Right. Right. So
Yeah.
instead of saying, hey, why don't we, all I got to do is get out of here and things will be someplace. The grass is always greener on the other side, is
Yeah, if I
kind of
could
what you're saying.
only get to Croatia, it will be better.
Yeah. If I can only get to that greener grass,
Yep.
it can only get better. And you're saying the grass is pretty darn green in your own backyard.
That's right, right. And when you realize that this restlessness is actually getting in your way of being happy, of being feeling satisfied or content,
Hmm.
you got to get to that point where you understand that there's a downside to wanting everything to be, you know, frenetically energizing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. And in fact, Ann, that's one of my, oh my gosh, that's my top saboteur of the
Yes.
saboteurs. My position on the mask issue has always been, if you want to wear your mask, wear your mask. If you want to stay home. If you don't, you shouldn't have to. Let
Right.
people kind of make the decision for their own, but don't ruin lives and shutting down businesses.
Right. Right.
And I mean, and then like I said, you're ruining people's lives. Many of these individuals are never going to recover again. They put their life savings into their restaurant
Yep.
or their small
Yep.
manufacturing, and now it's
Yep.
gone.
Yep.
and
Yep.
there's no recovery for that individual.
Yes.
So that's always been my position. When to wear your mask, wear your mask. You don't. So I'm living in the state of Washington. My
Hmm.
home, I still consider it home, even though I've been in Washington. My wife and I, we've been married for, I think, 27 years, 28 years. So I've been out here for that long, but I always say I'm from Texas.
Yep.
Is originally from San Antonio, Texas. So when Texas opened up, my thought was, if we can just get
Get
back
to
to Texas,
Texas. If I could
everything's
only
going
get
to
to
be fine.
Texas.
Let's just go
Right.
back to Texas and we'll be cool. Everything's going to be great.
Right.
And then as I kind of thought about it, what happens if things start turning in Texas? Then what? What if Texas turns, in a direction? Right now, they're moving in a direction that I appreciate more than, the state of Washington. If we're in phase 2 and
Yeah.
kids aren't even back to school. I don't know if kids here haven't even gone back to school.
Right.
So what happens if those negatives start cropping up someplace else? And some people here in the state of Washington, I don't know who would, but they find it
Yeah.
we're doing the right thing, and
Yeah.
if we're sacrificing somebody else's livelihood,
Yeah.
and wrecking it, well, we've saved someone's life out there, right?
Well, yeah, and here's the thing, Mike. We're in an unprecedented time where there is probably not one right answer. It's
Mhm.
not cut and dry. It's constantly evolving. I mean, the whole thing started with, wow, we don't have to worry about masks at all, right? I
Right.
was in Africa in February of 2020. They were starting to take our temperature when we got even when we got on the bush plane to go to the Masimara. They're measuring our temperature. So it was just starting to creep its way when we were there, and when we got back, it was within 2 or 3 weeks where everything shut down. It was like that, and everything was shut down to the point where you saw people walking outside, and if you saw somebody coming into your horizon, you'd divert 6 feet. It would be like you're walking, "Oh my god," you practically fall into the lake so that you weren't 6 feet away from somebody or 6 feet too close to them. And, anyway, all of this, has evolved. It has evolved from, where is it? And, what's the treatment?
Mhm, mhm.
What's the real risk? What's, et
Right.
cetera. And now we're at the stage of, okay, vaccines, but what about these variants? And while you're at it, what if the vaccine kills you? And what percentage of the people can actually set foot in that restaurant? Is it indoor? Is it outdoor? I mean, think about the
Yeah. Oh,
things
yeah.
we've had to juggle for the last year. No wonder why these characters have come to the fore. Now, these characters have been with us our whole lives, and so they
Right.
appear at certain times, and then usually at times of high stress they appear. Then when the stress starts to level goes down, we don't tend to do this as much. But these
Correct.
are stress provoked um, characters that we have, and we all have a variety of one or two of them. Oftentimes we don't see it in ourselves; we see it in others. So I would not necessarily be you know, the first to say, "Oh gosh, I tend to stay away from unpleasant things.
Mhm, mhm,
I'm an
mhm.
avoider." I'm going to be first to say that, you know, that anal stickler will be the
Right.
first thing I'm going to see before I recognize my own role in that dynamic. That's why it's
Right.
so important to unearth this, especially since I think we've been practicing many of these habits for the last year
Correct.
as a
Correct.
world, as a society, as a business, etc.
Yes. So it's not only these characters that we spot in other people,
Right.
where the blind spot is seeing them in ourselves.
Exactly. And a
And,
lot of times we do not.
yeah, a coaching call I had with another client, from the South, well, in Texas, is he was recognizing everyone else's saboteur.
Yep.
And this is a guy, quite honestly, I mean, he's a well thought out individual. You know,
Right.
he tries to think things through before making a decision, and he's open to, you know, additional opinion in data, but
Yep.
he's got his core beliefs.
Sure.
And this is one of the things that we were talking about, because some of his, you know, people are coming back into the business, and he's concerned about these saboteurs that are sabotaging their
Yep.
careers and in the production of the organization. Because if the organization, the company doesn't make it, you know, it doesn't matter what your saboteur is, you're going to be out of a job.
Right.
And there's only so much government money that they can kind of, you know, push around before, you know, you're out. And
Yeah.
if you want to go find another job to work at, well, good luck in doing that as well.
Right.
You know, because it's affecting, you know, them as well. So this is one of the things that we talked about as we kind of talked through this, and he was talking about his concerns because he was truly concerned about the individuals, and he was
Right.
trying to be empathetic, not
Yes.
sympathize. Okay. He was trying
Right.
to empathize with some of these saboteurs. His concern was, you know, the generation, you know, of some of these individuals, the bar of mental toughness is really low.
Well,
And that's what he could see, that some of them, you know, were just anything could kill them, right? And everything had a cause, a political cause to it. And he was really concerned about their what I call their grit, their mental toughness, the victimization. He could see
yeah.
that, right? But as we talked through it, and I was kind of drilling down to, you can see it in them, but what do they see in you? What are you displaying, or, you know, as you're trying to coach these people back in? The avoider, right?
Right.
Was this an avoider at the very top there? You know, let's just stop talking about it. You know, this is
Yep.
no big deal.
Yep.
You know, everything's going to be fine. I mean, he's ex-military, so he's been, you know, through military discipline, you know, toughness.
He could very well be somebody who has a controller hyperachiever tendency.
Oh gosh,
You
yeah.
know, get on. And here's the point I want to make too. I'm glad you brought up the topic of grit, because grit is this idea of the things that you do to muscle through something.
Right,
You
right.
know, like you toughen up, Henry, get on with it, versus a thing called resilience. And resilience is
Mm-hmm,
different than grit. Resilience is about an individual's ability to pivot away
mm-hmm,
from
mm-hmm.
mindsets that aren't working and take an open look at what could work instead. All right.
Right, and that's a good point. That's a good
And
point, and that's what we were. That's what we where the conversation pivoted was. What are some strategies that could help these individuals get
right.
over their fear, because it's
Yes.
real to them,
Right.
right? Uh, and help them get back into the workplace where they can keep their job,
Right.
where they can be productive, where they can find victory in, you know, being able to overcome or circumvent some of these obstacles. And what role are you going to play in that?
Yes. And, bear in mind, a lot of these things too are thoughts that we have, and we couple ourselves or get hooked by our thoughts, and then that becomes the reality that
Right.
drives us. So if
Correct.
you are, having a thought about what on earth would happen if I got the virus and now all my organs are shutting down,
Hmm.
right? And so you're hooked by those thoughts that I'm the next guy, and it's going to be me, and this is what's going to happen. And as I fade away with no one holding my hand, that's my lot, right?
Right.
So those are thoughts that
Hmm.
uh, drive something like hypervigilance, for instance. We couple ourselves to those mindsets, and
Right.
then from there, our stress response or our mindset goes to these saboteurs, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So, me as an avoider, you know, my one of my famous lines is, "I don't think that's the way I'm gonna go down." So when I went when I went skydiving when I turned 50, people said, "Were you scared?" And I said, "No," because as I got into the plane with the parachute, I figured today's not my day to go to die, and it's probably not gonna be in a parachute, right? Well, that was my that was my avoider,
Right.
saying, "Nah, I suppose if somebody had had a heart rate monitor on me, would have seen my heart rate probably at 250 or something, not 250, that's high, but
No.
I died that way. But you know what I mean? It was like, "I'm fine. I'm not gonna die this way. Jeez, I don't this is just not my day to die."
I'm
But
not
it
gonna,
was my
yeah. I'm not gonna
but that
splat to the ground. I'm gonna die of a cardiac arrest
I'll die of something
at
else, but it won't
2,000
be this,
feet.
and it won't be this. It won't be
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so the point is that it was my defense strategy,
Hmm.
and certainly
Okay.
it was useful to jump out of the plane with my avoider's mindset. But at the same time, what if I was very flippant about the warning signals, like, "You know what? I saw that plane land and that engine didn't sound good, and I'm gonna be like, I'm not gonna die that way anyway. They'll use the other engine," or something like that, and I don't take the time to process stuff that might be important. Then
Yeah.
I'm into the downside of this, everything's fine.
Yeah.
I'm into the possibility I might ignore something really important.
So the best thing that leaders can do in as they're encountering these saboteurs,
Yes.
and they can see them. And if anyone wants a copy of this download that we have is kind of a reminder.
Yes.
Email Ann at. I'll make sure that your email address is above your head there, Ann.
All right.
Ann at Temple Executive Coaching, and be happy to provide you with one of these downloads that you can kind of keep and look and see. But what can they do as they start to see these, these
Yes.
saboteurs, up front on the surface? They're not hidden anymore. They're
Right.
out front. What
Yeah.
can they do to work with
So,
people in these?
yes, yes. So here's a couple of things. So, the first thing is to actually go to a website called positiveintelligence.com and take the saboteur assessment. So, what this assessment will do will give you an idea about what your particular saboteurs look like.
Mhm.
Um, the assessment is free, and you can get some really, really good information on that. Positiveintelligence.com and do the saboteur assessment. The second thing you would do if you want to really start to understand this is to book a consultation with me, a free consultation. We'll go over those results and I'll help you kind of see them, because you might even get the results and go, I don't know. I don't think of myself as much of a, what's wrong with being a controller? I mean, if I don't control things, then they're going to go off the rails. And you might not even see the downside or the dark side of this mindset that you
Yeah.
have.
Mhm.
So, booking a consultation with me, you can actually book it at anholm.net. You can put that up, and there's a direct booking for get a consultation, and that's also free.
Right.
There's many things. In fact, I have an entire 8-week boot camp program to help people understand their saboteurs and
Mhm.
learn how to deal with them. And I love it. Either to see somebody individually or to see a group of leaders where we can actually, form a pod and have some conversations around this. But I think it's really helpful
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
to find out what those saboteurs are, understand the impact in your life, and then start to deal with them. I recommend the 8-week boot camp to do that, and I host it, so it's
Good.
we make sure that it's a coach hosted experience,
Mhm.
and we start to talk about these kinds of things, and we can set it in any kind of context that you want. Return to work is a huge one because you're
Right.
going to see this stuff coming in spades in a return to work scenario, but it could be some other scenario as well. Um, there are some certain strategies that we learn on how to proceed with some of these saboteurs. So,
Mhm.
some of those things might be making sure, I use the term anticipatory angst. Are you, drumming up uh, bad scenarios in your
Mm.
head because things are uncertain? So you're trying to, predict what it's actually going to be like. I actually have a brother, a hypervigilant brother who does this a lot. I would get these texts about what he thought was going to happen next. And in that scenario making, that was his strategy to try to deal with all this, was to try to read the tea leaves. I'm always telling him, quit trying to read the tea leaves. But reading the tea leaves actually puts people in a high state of anxiety,
Ah,
because they're living the reality that hasn't even happened.
right.
We think about, another thing is something like worry. Well, worry is interest paid on real problems,
Hmm.
things like that. So we work on, noticing that we're doing that kind of thing, and how to bring ourselves back into the present moment with curiosity, innovation,
Mhm.
trying to decide what we're going to do and making sure it's true to what our true mission, our true goal is. So we flip the saboteurs on their head, and we
Mm.
start looking at, well, this is what we can do instead. Those characters will always be there, but we just don't need them to hijack our minds and turn us into these guys when we're trying to manipulate or not manipulate, excuse me, navigate a very complex world, a very
Right.
complex and unsettled world.
Yes, very good. Well, Anne, if you can turn the control back over to me, you need to give me the control. Let's show everybody.
I'm a hyper controller. No. Okay.
I took the assessment myself. And
Yes.
I'm telling you the power of going through this assessment, because I thought, what's wrong with being a hyperachiever? I mean, I'm achieving, man. But
Yeah.
once you kind of go through the assessment and the definitions that it provides, like Anne is saying, the saboteurs are just what it does. They sabotage our progress
Yes.
in almost anything. We're not just talking, in the workplace and as a leader,
Right.
but anywhere within your organization. Or within your life, I apologize, within your career itself. So taking a look at mine, I went through and I took, and my number one, now this was pre-COVID, by the way.
Yep. Oh yeah, it was, wasn't it?
This was pre-COVID. And my number one was restless. Number
Yes.
two was hyperachiever. What's wrong with that? So I achieve. Number three is control. Number four was avoider. And number five is stickler.
Yep.
So we've always got a top five, right? So how I kind of look at this is that it doesn't mean that these saboteurs will always fall in order.
No, they
It
won't.
doesn't mean when I face something, the first thing I'm going to do is become restless, and then I'm going to become a hyperachiever, then I'm going to become a controller. These are the top five, and they can trade place,
Yes, sir.
with the varying situation. So those were my top five. I think, stickler, and then I became the pleaser is the bottom, and then hyper rational, and then the bottom two were victim and hyper vigilant. Were the bottom
Hmm.
two. And when I say the bottom two, you get a score that comes with this, and
Right.
the definition will even give you a score, or I should say the assessment. It kind of explains the score to you. But restless was 7.5, hyperachiever 7.5, controller 6.3, and then it kind of drops off from there. Avoider was a score of 5.6, stickler 5. So
Yeah.
then they drop. But what is really good about this test, the assessment, I should say, not a test, the assessment, is it gives you the definition. Here's the definition of restless.
Yes.
Restless, constantly in search of greater excitement in the next activity or constant busyness, rarely at peace or content with current activity. And that can drive some people crazy, right? So if you're
Yes.
leading an organization and this is who you are, and you're restless and you're not content in the current activity, and you're constantly changing directions of your
Yep.
company, you're really messing around with
Well,
the
yeah,
minds of some of your people.
Yes, yes. The follow through piece, you end up being, uh, you might have a wide root system, but the root system goes down an inch. So
Hmm.
it puts you in a position of being pretty precarious, and it doesn't. And we used in the other conversation, the I'm going to go to Croatia or Bora Bora, but it can be something like I'm starting to work with my strategy for marketing,
Hmm.
and you can
Mm.
start with something that you're starting to look at, but then another shiny penny pops up, and so you pivot over to that,
Right.
and so you could say to yourself, the lie is, well, what's wrong with trying to find the best option? I'm just looking at all the options, right? Right? So,
Right.
but what you can have with that is you can have quite a debris path, right?
Right.
So you could have, let's say, you're starting to take the team in this. Imagine yourself going through a jungle, all
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And people are following you, and you take a few steps. Oh, no, 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 I don't think it's that way. And then you go this way, and people are following you. No, 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 I think it's this way. And so you've got people going through the meander with you,
Yeah.
and you can't understand why they're frustrated when you propose something new, you
Constantly.
know,
Yeah.
constantly. And people think, well, what's wrong with your imagination? Why are you not considering this or whatever? You're so, dull. You don't look at all these options. Well, there is a price to be paid for going this way
Hmm.
and this way. Oh, that shiny penny. And at the end of the day, you've accomplished nothing
Right.
except getting a general, shiny penny exploration.
And until you can spot these things within yourself,
Right.
you you really aren't doing anyone any good by spotting them in others before
Right.
you can spot your own first.
Well, I'll tell you the interesting thing too is my top saboteur actually is restless, like yours,
Right.
followed by avoider and then hyperachiever. But what was so funny was um, when I shared this with my adult children that, oh, this was my saboteurs. They're like, I said, they don't seem that bad. And the kids said, that's what we hate about you. This is what makes you so annoying sometimes. Oh, I thought I was just kinda, down for anything and whatever, and they're like, "No, sometimes that's not, sometimes that's so annoying. You're jumping
It's
all over the place."
yes, it's the definition, as I was looking through my assessment, yes, there's the word, right? Restless. But what's the definition and what's the actions to
Yep.
these saboteurs?
Well,
That's
and then
where you get the real kicker.
the
And
impact, the
yeah, that's the
impact.
true impact of it.
Yep,
Is
yep,
yeah, not just the word. Hyperachiever. I'm always achieving. I'm an achiever. Well,
right.
why are you? Why is that sabotaging? You know
Yes.
where you're
Yes.
at. So don't kid yourself. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
the
you're
real
just just like, if I have to have a saboteur, I might as well be a hyperachiever, at least I'm getting stuff done. It's like, well, you might be, there might be things you're not willing to engage with because you don't think you're going to be the top dog on it. You
yeah.
might
Mm,
become sidetracked with your own goals, and you absolutely positively leave your most important relationships in the dust.
yeah.
It's there's the debris path with hyperachieving, and so here we go.
Yeah.
They even will give you the justification behind it. The idea
Yeah.
that life is about achieving and producing results. I And a lot of times it's like, if I don't look like I'm the top dog, I my image is ruined,
Right.
and
Right.
that's a big part of it as well. So each of these things, as an individual takes the assessment, they can see this, they'll see the justification, the lies that these saboteurs tell. And when they sit down with a consultation with me, I'll help them to see what this impact is actually in their life. Because a lot of times we see this and we go, yeah, I don't know about that. And then you start talking and you say, okay, has there ever been a time when you your goals meant everything to you? In fact, we were talking about those food guys. on that
Right.
food story on the History Channel, where your goals were your goals, and that was it, and everybody else gets sort of left in the dust. And then you can say, well, look at all that that person achieved. The funny thing about it is there's a lot of individuals who achieve and also um, honor their relationships.
Yeah.
Because so it's an interesting conversation, and there's many
Yeah.
many many combinations of all of
And
this.
I think to your point, and the impact on others of being a
Yep.
hyperachiever. And I don't want to
Yep.
pick on hyperachievers, but this is what I mean. What's the impact? What's
Yep.
the action to that word? So I hear hyperachiever, I think I'm achieving all the time, but what's that impact on others? And it outlines it here. Peace
Right.
and happiness. Remember, impact on self and the impact on others. Peace and happiness is fleeting and short-lived
Yep.
in brief celebrations of achievement, and then it's done. Self-acceptance is continually conditioned on the next success. Ooh. Lose touch with deeper feelings, deeper self, and ability to connect deeply with others. So
Yes.
in a world when we're talking about deep connections and being authentic and in your true self, nope, not with a
Yep.
hyperachiever. Others might be pulled into the performance vortex of the hyperachiever and become similarly lopsided in their focus on external achievement. So
Yes.
if you're
That would be like the worker who's working 24/7 and makes everybody feel like they're slackers
right,
because they're not, answering emails at 11 o'clock, and then they start feel bad about themselves, and so now they're returning emails at 11 o'clock and not going to bed, which
right,
is what they should be doing. In fact, some organizations will even change policies based on these kinds of results.
mhm,
The hyperachieve, the guy's sending emails at 1 a.m. Don't say, "Oh, you're such a hard worker, way to go." And then the next guy goes, "Well, gosh, if that's what it takes," and he's sending emails at 1 a.m. You see, you can start this culture of this hyperachievement, and to the point where it's unsustainable.
true,
But if you don't have like an organization-wide mindset around that,
mhm,
you can really, really create some problems.
right.
Burnout, lack of engagement. People start saying, there's nothing I can do. I'm never going to be as good as I want to be. So they stop, the engagement's down. And so these are
Yeah,
all really, really important
very
possible
short-lived.
manifestations.
Right, very short-lived, very short-lived. So we all have them, all right? It doesn't mean that it's bad not to have some of them, but it's a matter of managing our saboteurs
Yep.
really before we can start helping others. We invite you to please contact Ann at Temple Executive Coaching. Let's get you your free positive intelligence saboteur assessment. Book a free appointment. We're giving this stuff away for you guys for free. Book a consultation with Ann to understand your results. I've been through it with Ann. We've got a couple of organizations who have this is now a part of their employee development. This is
Yes.
what they've put in place to get the most out of themselves and their employees. It's working. Book the session. And thank you once again so much for your brain science at work right here as we experienced it. Thank you for joining with
Yep.
us on this episode. And listeners, we want to hear from you. What are some of the stories, some of the things that you've seen as employees are coming back in the workplace, and some of your concerns as well?
Yep. Perfect. Wonderful.
Until then, hey guys, thank you so much for joining and tuning in, and we look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you much.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.